Hello everyone, I'm SystemCheck66, welcome back to the channel. And last night I stayed up till 3 AM to watch the Game Awards, because over here the Game Awards started at 1:30, it was postponed from 1 to 1:30, and I basically tried to hold out like as much as I could, but it just went on and on and on, and I didn't get to see Half-Life 3 reveal, which a lot of people in the comments were saying might be revealed. Didn't happen, because obviously I've checked today. But I did get to see the new Resident Evil trailer, and it is now cemented that Leon Kennedy is returning to Raccoon City, and he is one of the main protagonists of Resident Evil Requiem. He's also driving a brand new Porsche, and I think much like Resident Evil Death Island and Resident Evil 2's remake, we're getting a little bit of product placement. So Porsche are putting product placement in this game, and it's been used in a promotional image. And in Resident Evil 2 Remake, we had Harley Davidson, that was the bike that Claire was driving into Raccoon City, as well as Resident Evil Death Island featuring a Decay that Leon rides. So yeah, we're getting a little bit of product placement, and I think the thing is, it goes to show you how far Resident Evil has come, but also how mainstream the series has become at this point. Now, how I feel about that and how you guys feel about that is going to be entirely subjective depending on the person. I don't mind it. I mean, I like cars, I like Porsche as a brand, I like Ducati, I like Harley Davidson, you know. Claire was riding on a Harley Davidson into Raccoon City in the Resident Evil 2 remake, and there was promotional images for the Harley Davidson. As much as the gearhead in me likes that, and I think it's cool, at the same time, it does feel a tiny bit icky, I'm not going to lie to you. Because this is a series that really grew from its own strengths and merits, and the fact it was this raw, rugged survival horror series that, you know, just hadn't been seen during the PlayStation 1 days. And now, you know, we're at this point where the video games are having product placements for Porsche. And yeah, like, it's going to make me feel a tiny bit icky. Also, like a lot of people have said on Reddit, he's going to be more a 911 Turbo type of guy, yeah? Or even like a Mustang driver, so, yeah. But with that out of the way, let's get into the trailer. The trailer was awesome. I enjoyed it. It shows that the game will have a fair amount of action with Leon when you play as Leon, and then you're going to get more of the survival horror elements with Grace. That's cool. I don't mind that. I think it was a great trailer. It did impress me. I was happy with it. Was it as good as the first two trailers? No. In my personal opinion, it wasn't. But I think that's down to the first two trailers being a bit more mysterious and not revealing too much. And this one kind of revealed quite a bit. Now, what I will say is, if you're watching this video and you don't want to be spoiled at all, then I suggest avoiding this video like the T-virus, because I am going to get into some spoilers and some stuff that could actually potentially turn out to be true. Whereas I have said in previous videos that I would not be covering fake leaks and what I perceive as fake leaks, at the end of my last video I decided, what the hell, they're circulating all around, I might as well cover them just at the end of the video, which I did. Now, there was two sides of that coin. On one side, I could be completely wrong about the 4chan leaks, and my video, or at least the end of the video, would age considerably badly, or everything would add up, and with this trailer, stuff would start to slot into place. And I think stuff started to slot into place when I was watching this trailer. So when covering this trailer and speaking on it, I think that I'm going to incorporate some of these 4chan leaks into the conversation, and you guys will see where I'm coming from and how things are starting to link up, and the fact that these 4chan leaks might actually be on the money. So like I said, if you don't want to be spoiled, take yourself away from this video right now, because there's going to be some fucking spoilers. So some things I want to touch upon that don't actually fall into the sort of leak kind of category is things like Leon coming face to face with smarter zombies, as well as Grace, I guess, facing off against smarter zombies, maybe, I don't know. Maybe the dynamic of, like, Grace's, you know, gameplay won't incorporate the smarter zombies. Maybe they get smarter later on, and then Leon has to take on the smarter zombies. A bit like the Crimson Heads in the Resident Evil 1 remake. But now the zombies can actually use weapons, so we've got one that actually wields a chainsaw that Leon is able to wrestle off of him and chainsaw the zombie. This reminds me so much of Evil Within 2, where Sebastian kills the sadist enemy from the first game with his own chainsaw. Seeing as those two games were directed and produced by Shinji Mikami, I can see that Nakanishi has sort of been influenced by that. Having said that though, the chainsaw has been prominent since Resident Evil 4. And so this is 100% most definitely a callback to Resident Evil 4 and a little bit of fan service. And finally Leon gets to like use the chainsaw. Even though Ethan kind of used the chainsaw against Jack Baker in Resident Evil 7, so he's not the first person to actually be using a chainsaw in the Resident Evil series. Hey, I'm getting off topic. It's definitely a nod to Evil Dead 2 as well as a callback to Resident Evil 4, you know, with Dr. Salvador. But it's also a way to make the zombie a more intense enemy that you fight. You know, and the fact that they're smarter now, they're gaining a little bit more intelligence. I think it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool, but at the same time, I'm just a little bit tired of like chainsaw wielding enemies. You know, they're becoming like this staple thing along with Leon in Resident Evil, and I don't know, just yeah, it's cool. It's cool. It's just a little bit cheesy as well. But seeing as Resident Evil has always had that cheesy element, I guess, you know, it fits. It definitely fits. So, and seeing as these trailers aren't revealing too much of the rest of the game, I'd say that maybe there's going to be a few more surprises. So we'll just have to wait and see. If it's just zombies gain some intelligence and they can use weapons, I'm going to be a bit disappointed, because it's basically going to be the villagers, you know, from Resident Evil 4 just done with zombies, which I think they sort of tried to do Resident Evil 6, and it didn't really work in my opinion. But this looks a lot better than that, than the way they handled zombies in Resident Evil 6, so that's got my hopes up. We get to see Leon driving his Porsche, so that's in the trailer. And the reveal was done really well, where he steps out of the car and he's in front of the villain's kind of like main HQ. To my understanding anyway, that's his main HQ. It seems to me like the villain operates freely, basically, because he has like an assistant. He's got this building that's, you know, just open to the public, essentially. Not open to the public, it's obviously got gates and stuff that lock the public out, but if you make an appointment with him or you do dealings with him, he's openly there, you know, he's not hiding behind the shadows, etc, etc. Another thing that it shows in the trailer, which I called and a lot of people have called, is that Grace is like this type of superhuman. She has obviously something in her blood that he wants, and she is essentially the chosen one. She is the games and the series MacGuffin at this point. Now, a lot of people theorise and think, as well as I do, that the antivirus Daylight that was from Outbreak is what's in her bloodstream, and that's what this villain wants. So I haven't revealed who the villain is at this point, because we're going to get to that eventually. But yeah, that's basically what he wants. He wants her blood, he wants the Daylight antivirus, and who knows, it's going to go towards Project Elpis. How he'll synthesize the antivirus to be used as a weapon is still yet to be revealed, and also hasn't been revealed in the leaks. They've only talked about what the actual virus is, I'm guessing, that he wants to create. Now, during the first trailer, we see Grace upside down, and she's already had blood drawn from her, so he does have some samples of her blood. So yeah, maybe the virus is then created and then jumps years into the future, and that's when we get maybe like Leon come into the game, or, you know, the leaks are spot on and it jumps between two timelines. So you have Leon in one timeline and then you have him in another timeline. Also revealed was the person that's walking in the street in the rain during the I think it's the first trailer. It's either the first or second trailer. That was Leon, definitely walking through the city streets, I think, where the Wrenwood Hotel is featured, I believe anyway. Now, I'd like to touch upon the music that was played during the trailer. I really, really liked it. I thought it was very cool. It's very cyberpunky, synthwave type of background music that was playing, and I really liked it. So if this is the music that we're going to be getting for the full game, I'm happy about that. I approve very much. We also get to see the main villain. It's the guy with basically the grey skin. He looks fucked up. He's got the goggles, and he's got like, it looks like he's got a gold grill in his mouth, or at least a silver grill in his mouth. So yeah, he's the main villain, and he is like calling out to Grace as she's trying to hide. And I think that particular part of the game is going to be like a stalker enemy type part, but it's not going to go on too long like Capcom have stated. There's going to be like small amounts of stalker enemy setups, you know, but it's not going to be for like the whole game. It's not going to be like a Resident Evil 7 situation or Mr. X and Resident Evil 2 remake. I think they're going to be handled in short bursts, so much like the trailer shows us this main villain kind of stalking Grace and calling out to her, and that's kind of creepy, that's scary, so yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Trying to think what else I can speak on before getting into how the leaks kind of match up to the trailer footage. It does seem to me like this game starts off as a mystery detective style plot, with Grace kind of going to search the Renwood Hotel, but with ulterior motives. Obviously, that's where her mother was murdered. You know, so the FBI have sent her there to carry out an investigation. One that she's not too happy with when watching the first trailer about at first, but then the director of the FBI, who is, by the way, feel kind of shady, he sends her out into the field. So, but once he mentions the connection with Alyssa, I think Grace becomes more open to going out into the field and searching the Renwood Hotel and covering this case. In this trailer, we get to see sort of the cop that gets infected from the first trailer. He's with her, and they're sort of ushering her into, you know, the Renwood Hotel, the crime scene. There's some absolutely amazing shots of sort of panning down to see like police cars and stuff arriving at the crime scene. The shots in the game are amazing. Like in this trailer are amazing. I've got to say that. Like just visually, it's such an incredibly put together trailer. You know, from Leon stepping out, seeing his foot, to then sort of panning up, and you see Leon, you know, 50-year-old Leon, sort of stepping out of his Porsche. I thought was handled so well, and it was just a great reveal. It was a great way to reveal the character. It's just a shame that the promotion for Requiem has been surrounded by leaks. It's just been leaks. That's all I've been hearing, and Leon's reveal and things like that. And it's just hard to avoid this sort of stuff. It really is, honestly. Like when you're there looking on Google trying to find out information about Requiem, and a Reddit post pops up. I mean, yeah, you can ignore it. You can just turn your phone off. You can stop going online. But when you want to cover Resident Evil, it's kind of hard to avoid that stuff. That's why I left it till the end of the last video to cover the 4chan leaks. But it seems like they're close to the mark, I'll be honest with you. And we are going to get into those. The last few things I want to point out is the fact that we get to see a small little snippet of a zombie kind of acting more intelligent. He kind of mumbles something. We kind of saw that with Brad Vickers in the Resident Evil 3 remake, so I think they're expanding on that, definitely. The atmosphere, the music, the way that this trailer is created, and the way that the game's going to feel is spot on. Like, I have to be honest, 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. So there are some like great sort of atmospheric moments within this trailer, and the music is, it's mwah, chef's kiss. Other things that we kind of got to look at is Leon just killing a whole horde of zombies with an axe. I thought that was really, really cool. I liked that. He's in the street somewhere and he just kills all these zombies with an axe. And also going into Raccoon City through sort of like the Arklay Mountains, you know, the woods surrounding the Arklay Forest, basically surrounding Raccoon City. So we see, I'm guessing, Leon heading into Raccoon City, and the sign's completely like fucked at that point, you know. It's just disintegrated. We get to see that Leon is the one to save Grace from the hag enemy, who I do think is Alyssa, is her mother, although I'm still not too sure about that, but all evidence points to it being Alyssa. So yes, Leon sort of saves Grace in the same way that he saves Claire in Resident Evil 2, where he's like, get down, you know, he blasts a zombie. In this, he's like, you know, come with me. He says something like that, like, come with me, and he like shoots the hag in the face and rescues Grace. So I love that. It's a callback to Resident Evil 2, the OG as well as the remake, you know, and Leon being the character he is, he can pull off those cool moments. And it not seem silly and over the top because it's Leon, you know, Leon Kennedy. But yeah, it seems like he does bump into Grace in the first few moments of the game. I'm guessing that the parts where Grace is trying to run away from the hag enemy in that hospital, I'm guessing after the Renwood Hotel, that is like the first sort of few moments of the game. It also seems like Leon goes to investigate this new villain and will meet him and sort of talk to him. I'm thinking we get his secretary kind of talking to someone, so I'm thinking that's Leon, because he drives the car into the sort of this mansion's grounds. He steps out of the car and it looks like he's been invited essentially in you know, by this villain, and he's investigating this villain. So it would be kind of an interesting take on a villain in the Resident Evil series where he can operate freely, and Leon's building up like a case and evidence against him. At the same time, you can tell that he is mutated in some form or another. Unless that's a later take on this villain, we will get into his name. I know it's revealed in the trailer, but there's things that match up with the leaks. That's why I'm leaving it for a bit later. But yeah, it seems like Leon will be able to converse with this new villain, and he's like a doctor. And I guess in this timeline, or sort of in this current Resident Evil timeline, people can be modified. They can be genetically modified, and you still can't really arrest them, you know. So it's a strange one. I like it. It's something new. It's something interesting, where they don't have to hide the fact that they're mutated in some way, that they're modified, and he's still like a doctor because his assistant addresses him as a doctor, you know, and says, you know, he's been expecting you. So Leon will be able to converse with this character, with this new villain, even though, you know, he has links to Umbrella and ties to Umbrella, and he is a suspect. I guess Leon doesn't have the information. He doesn't have the evidence to convict this psycho, this fucking freak. So it's just a really, really cool concept. And I think they've executed it very well, going by the trailer, at least. So I really, really like that. I like the fact that now we can have these, you know, these mutated humans within the Resident Evil universe, within society, that don't have to hide the fact they're mutated, or they don't mutate to the point where they're a threat to society or deemed a threat to society. But yeah, I mean, obviously this guy's he's a bad guy. He's doing shady stuff. But yeah, Leon, basically, because he's a doctor, I'm guessing he helps people. A bit like Umbrella, basically. He's helping people on the side, and then in the background, he's creating like these viruses or this virus, and he's doing shady shit. Typical Umbrella, ex-Umbrella employee, and yeah, he's basically what Spencer said he wanted the world to be like in Resident Evil 5. He is basically that imagined times 10. So even though he's mutated, he's a superhuman, essentially, as Spencer would call him. You know, he's the next evolutionary step. It seems to me like he's a very successful doctor in, I guess, virology, I'm guessing. I think the reason why he's able to just operate within society and no one's really giving him a hard time is because, on the face of it, he's like this mutated superhuman, but he does good, he helps people, but really he is a bad guy, you know. So that's why I'm guessing like Leon in the trailer, I don't know who it is talking to Leon. It didn't sound like Hunnigan. Could be someone completely new, but yeah, she said that there's a case against this villain, and that he has links to Umbrella. I'm guessing it's Hunnigan. It's just a different voice actor, I'm thinking. So yeah, like that's why Leon's basically going to investigate him. But yeah, like I said previously, he doesn't have enough evidence to arrest said villain. I could be missing something from the trailer, or some things from the trailer, because, I'm doing this just off the top of my head from what I remember from the trailer until we get into the spoilers and how things match up. But yeah, essentially the dynamic, I think, between the heroes and the villain is going to be an interesting one. It's going to be something different for Resident Evil fans. We also get to see a picture that Leon picks up of the good doctor, and it's him with a load of Umbrella-like scientists, fellow Umbrella scientists outside the hospital that's featured in the game, and he looks more human. So clearly this is a picture taken when Umbrella was still operating and functional, and then this game takes place way, way, way after the 1998 incident. And so yeah, he's now mutated and this superhuman. But it's just very interesting that this is going to be like a detective kind of story as well. We also get to see Leon holding this massive magnum looking gun, which I am a huge fan of. I really like that. And towards the end of the trailer, we get to see some of the like finishers that Leon can pull off. So he's got his roundhouse kick that looks just as badass as ever, but he can also jam his gun into a zombie's chin and blow his head clean off. as well as using the chainsaw against the smart chainsaw zombie. He's also got his one-liners as well, and one of the smart zombies sort of mumbles something in the trailer, and he says, "Look, I don't need a second opinion, it's cool." And I thought that was wicked. So we're getting his one-liners, his cheesy one-liners back for Requiem, which I'm very, very happy about. I like that Leon from Resident Evil 4, so yeah. So all looking great. Trailer was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I did feel like there was some similarities between this trailer and like the CG Resident Evil films, but I think that's because the production values have increased so much that now the video game trailers for Resident Evil just resemble the CG trailers. It's got to that point where the graphics look just as good, you know. So yeah, that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But yeah, all in all, like the trailer did everything it set out to do and bring people in and show the difference of dynamics. We're talking about all the trailers now, the dynamics between survival horror with Grace and also the more action horror slant and leaning with Leon Kennedy. Both though are sort of on this detective kind of path and also sort of slant that the game's going for, and I think that's cool. So both of them will be like undertaking this sort of detective role, and I like that. I think that's really cool. I think that's going to be like a running narrative, one of the running narratives throughout the game. But yeah, I thought the trailer was brilliant, really liked it, and I think when you fit it with the other two trailers, I think they go perfectly. They sync up really well. So now, let's get into where the leaks and the spoilers that I have tried to keep away from and keep you guys away from. Those of you that didn't want to be leaked and spoiled, but now you're like, sod it, like me, let's go for it. I tried to keep them away from you guys and myself for so long, but we're going to get into them now. So yeah, these seem a lot more concrete than they did a couple months ago. And the fact that we got the Leon reveal as well as this new trailer and how things add up to the trailer, yeah, they're definitely a little bit more on the nose and concrete than they were, say, 2 months ago. So this is a 2-month-old Reddit post, and it was originally from someone called Justice for M2. The person said, "I am not sure the credibility of such individual, but he may seem legit." So this is stuff that I tried to avoid for months. And even the person sharing or resharing these leaks, you know, this information, says, like, I'm not too sure of his credibility. So yeah, even he was doubting it as well as I was, you know, watching all these videos and reading this stuff months later, basically. First off, I want to get onto the antagonist of the game. Finally, we'll reveal his name. His name is Victor. Victor Gideon, to be precise. Now, originally, when I covered the leaks in my last video, at the end of that video, I said his name was Victor Yurichenko, which is either Russian or Eastern European. And I think that Capcom have changed this character, changed this antagonist and his name to basically not spark political debate or seem like they're taking sides. So making out a Russian character is like the bad guy, you know, and he's bad. They don't want to get drawn into that. They're very, very careful with that sort of stuff, especially after Resident Evil 5's controversy, you know, with them being labelled racist or whatever else. We're not going to get into that, but I'm just saying that I think that they've changed this antagonist from a Russian antagonist to an American antagonist instead. So now he is Victor Gideon, and like all leaks, some of these leaks are taken from outdated information. So sometimes the information at the time was who that character was, but then it changed, you know, as the game moved on in development. So yeah, I think that Victor Yurichenko was his original name, and he was like an Eastern European or Russian antagonist, and I think they changed it and switched it to an American antagonist, and his name is now Victor Gideon. Hence the reason why the leak, name-wise, other than Victor, with the surname doesn't match up to the name that is now being portrayed, and I think that is exactly the reason as to why things have changed. However, we can make the connection with his name still being Victor. So yeah, there is a connection there, you see. So yeah, I think that part of the leak at least is spot on. Also, another part of the leak, which is also like spot on and connects with this trailer, this latest trailer, is that Victor has a assistant named Ellen, and he also has a henchman named Palak. Now, I think Palak is the guy in the hood. Palak is his subordinate, it's the henchman in the hood, and he's the one that's sent to grab Grace and Alyssa, but obviously he fails, you know. So yeah, all that stuff matches up, and of course Ellen must be the assistant that is featured in the trailer talking to Leon and saying, you know, the Dr. Gideon has been expecting you. So that's Ellen. So yeah, again, that matches up. So now we're going to go back to that 2-month-old post on Reddit, and we're going to just go through all the information that they leaked and see what adds up and what doesn't. I think a lot of it does add up. So RE Requiem was in development as early as 2018. Melee weapons in RE Requiem give you the ability to follow up The Last of Us Part 2 style. Combat and other mechanics similar to The Last of Us Part 2, crafting mines, smoke bombs, throwing bottles to distract enemies, etc. will be featured in the game. We have seen Leon take out a horde of zombies with an axe and deflect a chainsaw again with a melee weapon like in Resident Evil 4 Remake. So I think those particular bits of information add up to the trailer, definitely, 100%. You know, so we're also going to get to craft mines and smoke bombs, throwing bottles, as well as, you know, we get to see him with an axe, you know, having taken out all these zombies. So yeah, that definitely adds up 100%. And it's also cool, it's a cool addition. It reminds me again of Evil Within 1 and 2, the fact that you can pick up these melee weapons and they're like insta kills, and also Last of Us is inspiration for this. Moving on, Capcom has heard loudly the critique directed towards the RE3 remake and RE Village and their linear style progression. So Capcom experimented with big open levels with free-flowing pace during RE4 Remake. Players will have to tackle objectives at their own discretion, similar to the Grand Hall in RE2 Remake, and like the 3 medallion puzzle, and the lake in the RE4 Remake's 2-headed shrine puzzles. Something I'm very excited about. Fully expect RE Requiem to return to Metroidvania levels and routing. So I'm very, very excited about that. We're going to get like the old school sort of backtracking of the old Resident Evil games, as well as like the remake of 2, 3 and also 4. So yeah, I'm glad they're moving forward in that direction still. Jill has no role in RE Requiem. We'll go through the other leaks, you know, after this, but in the other leaks it said that they are mentioned, who's the other person? Sherry Birkin. So Jill and Sherry Birkin are mentioned, but yeah, this basically says or confirms at least that Jill has no role in Resident Evil Requiem, which, sad face, is disappointing, seeing as she's my favourite character in the series. But I understand it, because then the game would be like overblown and just a bit of a muddled mess, so I get it. But they are mentioned, both Jill and Sherry, in the game, going by the other leaks. Resident Evil Requiem will take the building blocks set with RE4 Remake to increase wholesale environmental destructibility, particularly during boss encounters akin to Ada's showdown with El Gigante in the Separate Ways DLC. We didn't really get to see this in the trailer, but I can imagine that it's something that is gonna, you know, be in the game eventually when it comes time to play it. So that's exciting, that's really cool, because one of the best games to do that, to handle that, was Red Faction on the PlayStation 2. That was amazing for the time, the amount of environmental destruction that you could create. And then we had like Red Faction, I forget the name, was it Guerrilla? Red Faction Guerrilla, that kind of was like a GTA, but just everything was, you know, destructible. But we've also had it recently with games like Control, you know, where you'll just like fire your gun and it just shreds the scenery to pieces, and you can blow up the scenery and pull like bits of concrete, you know, out of the floor and chuck them at enemies. So we're going to be getting something maybe not as advanced as that, but there's still going to be like enough environmental destruction that it's going to keep us happy. Nick Apostolides reprises his role from both RE2 Remake and RE4 Remake. So that's good. I like Nick as the voice of Leon. Resident Evil Requiem is the conclusion of Leon's trilogy between RE2 Remake to RE4 Remake to Resident Evil Requiem. So this is Leon's final hurrah, his send-off, and I can get behind that. I think that's true, definitely. Leon is 100% the main character next to Grace Ashcroft with a much bigger role. Oh, so okay, he's got a bigger role than Grace. I'm guessing it follows him more towards the later half of the game, but the trailer shows that he's just as prominent a character as Grace. So yeah, I can get behind that, I believe that. Ada will have a major role. We didn't get to see Ada, but I would think that wherever Leon goes, and if it does involve the connections and just shady stuff and spy stuff, you know, happening, then Ada's going to be not too far behind. So yeah, I can see Ada being in this game, definitely. And also, she wasn't in Village, she was supposed to be in Village, and the development team, as well as the director of that game, the producer of that game, and I think Nakanishi, along with the producer of this game, they all said that it was the wrong game with the wrong characters to have Ada in it. But there was concept art of Ada and everything. She was sort of finalised and realised, and she was going to appear in the game, but she didn't eventually. So I think, obviously, Ada being quite a fan favourite character and linked to Leon, I think they've saved her for this game. So I can see her being in this game, but that hasn't been revealed yet, so that's still up in the air as to whether that is that's true and she's going to be appearing in the game. Resident Evil Requiem will hit the sweet spot with horror when you play as Grace, and Leon is the fiery gung-ho superhero with his gameplay based upon higher octane action. The trailer pretty much shows that off, and the other trailers have showed that off. That I think that is the case, definitely. So Raccoon City will be the most expansive location yet, and says the game overall is huge and astounding. I'm excited. I'm excited to see what they do with Raccoon City. Grace Ashcroft will be the collector's edition statue. I think that has actually been revealed. Each location will have a unique common enemy type, so taking from Village, pretty much. That's cool. The more sort of like bosses, the better, and also we're going to have enemies that fit the locales. So yeah, I'm excited about that. And if the other leaks are to be believed, then we're getting some returning BOWs as well, which is exciting. So yeah. Leon is in the first trailer as a hidden figure walking in the rain. Hunnigan is the woman walking down the hallway at the end of the trailer. So that is Hunnigan speaking to Leon. It's just her voice sounded a little bit different. I think it's because she was a little bit unsure, and usually in the other entries as well as the CG film, she's a bit more like confident, I guess you could say. She's more of a confident character, but maybe this is like serious what's going on here, so she's not as confident. So yeah, but it's Hunnigan. Hunnigan will be Leon's main support aid through the radio system, similar to RE4 Remake. So again, yes, it is Hunnigan that we hear during the trailer. Marketing has been purposely tight-lipped as to not overshadow Grace Ashcroft with the reveal of Leon, seeing as though he is a popular or a highly popular character. Compares the tight-lipped to RE4 Remake, this is how it's written by the way, with Krauser being revealed shortly before the game's release, but no signs of regenerators. Focus was on building Grace's backstory and her place in the RE universe. Again, like I said, everybody kind of moaning that Leon wasn't in the game, and a lot of us saying, look, I'm happy if he's in the game. If he's not, I'm happy as well. Like, we have returning characters, so it could be anyone. But yeah, it kind of overshadowed Grace as a character. Do you see what I mean? It was like people weren't willing to give her a chance. This is why I was getting a little bit sort of fed up, is because I wanted to see what Capcom could pull out the bag, basically, after Ethan Winters being just a bit of a meh character. I kind of liked how Grace was being portrayed and how she was introduced in the previous two trailers. So I was excited to have this new character and then see these returning characters. The fact that Leon's in the game and you get to play as him, I'm not disappointed in that. I'm excited to play as him. Like, I still like Leon as a character. But the point I'm trying to make is, this is the reason why Capcom have been so tight-lipped. A lot of people are like, well, it was obvious. Well, yeah, I mean, they might have thought, yeah, it is obvious. But at the same time, they wanted to let Grace, shine on her own. So yeah. Anyway, rant done. Resident Evil Requiem is similar to RE2 Remake, RE4 Remake, and Resident Evil 7 with a bigger team behind the project. So that's cool, we got a big team behind it. Or larger than the previous games. Parry mechanic is back, we see that in the trailer, so that's confirmed. Leon's gameplay story will be paced slower in comparison to RE6, good, due to his wear and tear throughout missions and warfare taking its toll on him. So awesome, like I said, a more weathered, world-weary Leon. Yeah, more of that, please. Puzzle-centric. So we're going to have puzzles in the game. I'm happy, you're happy, we're all happy. Puzzles are making a comeback, it seems, in a big way as well. And it also goes in line with the sort of detective narrative and story that they've got going on. Forgot to mention that apparently Resident Evil Requiem will be Leon's send-off game. So this is going to be the last time we see Leon, and of course he's heading back to Raccoon City, sort of where it all started, and that fateful night that he got caught up in, trying to avoid getting munched by zombies. Right, before we get on to the next batch of leaks, I'm going to point out that there's been a picture circulating on Facebook. It's like an image, a still taken from the latest trailer, but it shows, and someone has highlighted it, that Leon has like a kind of infection mark on his neck. I don't think it's a bite mark, but it looks like an old infection mark. So that leads me to think maybe we'll have sort of damage carry over, you know, on characters, even through cutscenes, because this looks like it's taken from a cutscene. Maybe it's not, maybe it's literally just during gameplay. The game looks flipping good, so, you know, we're at that point now where it just seamlessly blends between the two. But yeah, we could have sort of damage carry over, which is pretty much par for the course in most games in this day and age. You know, there's always like battle damage and stuff like that. But yeah, who knows? Maybe it's a mark from, you know, being infected with the Plaga. Although I don't remember. Oh yeah, actually, it is. It's the mark left from being infected with the Plaga because they inject it into his neck. Well, yeah, Sadler injects it into his neck. So yeah, I'm guessing that's what it was. That's pretty cool. A lot of people were theorizing that maybe he dies. I doubt it. I think that's just to show that he, you know, he was previously infected. But you guys can theorize yourselves. Let me know in the comments. Do you think it's like a current mark, you know, one that he's received? Do you think it's battle damage, or do you think it's from when he was infected with the Plagas? Let me know in the comment section down below what you think and what your theories are regarding that. You'll be able to see it if you pause the trailer at the right time. There is a shot of like his neck, and you can kind of see a mark there. So yeah, feel free to do that. So now we move on to the proper leaks, the real nitty gritty stuff. And whereas the others were 2 months old, these are only 8 days old. I'm guessing that the 4chan leak is actually older than that, but I think it's after the previous ones that we just went over. So let's get into it. I'm going to read all the way through it, just like last time, but now we have the context of the trailer and Leon actually being in the game and how things do sync up and add up. So Grace Ashcroft is the main protagonist of the game, but I think later on Leon becomes more the main protagonist. So yeah, it will switch over to Leon, I guess, because he's taking on like the big boys, you know, he's taking on basically, essentially Umbrella, like re-envisioned in the form of Victor and his cronies, you know, and I guess his little business that he's got going on. So yeah, Alyssa Ashcroft is the stalking creature shown in the demo. After her death in the prologue, her body is taken by Victor. It says Yurichenko here, but obviously now we know it's Victor Gideon. And actually, going on the Resident Evil wiki at the moment, typing in Victor Gideon into the Resident Evil wiki, we've got some extra information. So taking a little sidestep, because obviously I've already covered these leaks anyway in my last video, so we'll take a little sidestep. So here's the official synopsis, or I'm guessing the official synopsis, and it kind of reveals quite a bit. So Dr. Victor Gideon was a researcher with ties to the Umbrella Corporation. After Umbrella went bankrupt in 2003, he purchased the Rhodes Hill Chronic Care Center. So again, people with, you know, chronic care needs, he facilitated that. But in actual fact, behind the scenes, he was conducting experiments on them. So over the years, he conducted experiments aimed at freeing Elpis, a US government project connected to the sterilization strategy that destroyed Raccoon City. Interesting. So Daylight, you know, was involved in that. In October 1998, Gideon became aware of the efforts of investigative journalist Alyssa Ashcroft to uncover his operation and decided to assassinate her. 8 years later, in October 2026, he realized that Alyssa's daughter, Grace, was the key to freeing Elpis. However, his plans were interrupted by DSO agent Leon S. Kennedy and FBI analyst Grace Ashcroft. Biography. In 2018, Victor pays a visit to Alyssa Ashcroft, who is staying in the Wrenwood Hotel. He first attacks the hotel manager with a knife, then continues his pursuit and manages to fatally injure Alyssa. Grace pushes him, causing him to fall onto an oil lamp, which ignites and severely burns him. Interesting. 8 years later, in October 2026, he realizes that Grace's blood is the key to freeing Elpis. He kidnaps her with the intent of draining her blood and conducting experiments. So that is actually interesting. So, okay, that kind of shakes things up a little bit. So that's not actually Palak, the hooded man. they're saying that that is Victor Gideon, who's the hooded man, and when we see him after that, he's more disfigured. He is obviously already infected as the hooded, man, because he looks infected, right? Or the Resident Evil wiki has got it wrong, okay? But to be honest with you, I would say that maybe this is on the money. So we're going to continue with the leaks, but going forward, it seems like Victor is actually the hooded man that goes after Alyssa and Grace, and that Palak is someone else. So he is his henchman, but he's someone else, someone we maybe haven't seen. But then, Ellen is his assistant, and she's clearly shown in the trailer. So yeah, we haven't seen Palak yet. But yeah, Victor is the hooded man. So that's been cleared up, so that's pretty cool. That's all there was regarding his character on the Resident Evil wiki so far. So we've already gone through the fact he's got an assistant, he's got a henchman, so we'll move on. Leon S. Kennedy will participate in the game in 2 distinct phases. First, in the search for the alleged villain Victor, which we see during the trailer, and he actually gets to talk to him, and he's invited into his home, or at least the hospital, where he's working. Here's where things start to add up. Investigated by the United States government for his connection to Operation Elpis, which seeks secret groups linked to the past of Umbrella and Raccoon City. So again, this is all tying into the Resident Evil wiki and also the trailer and stuff we see in the trailer. So like I said, I think these are on the money, definitely. The second part of Leon's participation will be later in the plot in the rescue of Grace Ashcroft. So again, we're going to have a time jump, because on the Resident Evil wiki it said that he goes after Alyssa and Grace, and then in 2026 he kidnaps Grace. So yeah, like that will be where the time jump happens, and then Leon's sort of on the trail, like on his trail, and trying to rescue Grace and stuff. So quite interesting. The next, I don't know, because the trailer didn't reveal this, and I don't know if this is on the money, but Yoko Suzuki and Claire Redfield have minor roles in the story. Claire is part of TerraSave, and maybe Yoko has joined TerraSave, so that could very well, be a possibility. Maybe they appear at the end, sort of after the stories come to a close, or maybe they appear in some form, halfway through. Who knows? But Raccoon City is a irradiated zone, so I wouldn't be surprised if Claire and Yoko show up. Again, it does say they have minor roles, so they are returning characters, and it was hinted by the producer of this game that there will be returning survivors of Raccoon City. So not just Leon and Alyssa. So yeah. Jill Valentine and Sherry Birkin are mentioned as important survivors of the Raccoon City incident, but like the other sort of leaks and information said, they don't play a role in this particular game. They're just mentioned. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because they both kind of escaped with kind of superhuman abilities. Like Sherry, definitely, she can heal herself, she can regenerate, as we know from Resident Evil 6, and Jill has been experimented on and fused with the T-virus, and then, well, after she was given the antivirus, the vaccine, and she fused like her cells and stuff. The reason why Wesker was experimenting on her in Resident Evil 5 is because her cells and everything, her body fused with the T-virus really well. So yeah, it makes sense that they are mentioned. The game has about 6 main bosses, so this is interesting. 3 of which are faced by Leon, and the other 3 by Grace. Obviously, one of those bosses will be Palak, the other one will be Gideon, and we will also probably have a boss battle with the Hag, supposed to be Alyssa Ashcroft, mutated. But then the other 3, that's 3 down, but the other 3, who knows, right? They haven't been revealed yet, so that's cool. Like, maybe we'll get some surprises, some callbacks to the older Resident Evil titles. I mean, like, imagine seeing an even more mutated G-mutant that survived, or an even more mutated Licker, maybe a tyrant sort of running around somewhere or walking about somewhere. The possibilities are endless, but yeah, there's another 3 bosses that we don't know about, so that's something I'm looking forward to. Some creatures such as Lickers, G-types and Drain Demios return with a more deteriorated appearance and minor mutations. Again, the previous information, the previous leaks said that there will be locations that feature specific enemy types. So these are obviously the Raccoon City enemy types. So I'm excited to see what else we find in Raccoon City, but I'm also excited to see these returning BOWs. And yeah, I do think definitely, like, we have Raccoon City, we're going back to Raccoon City, and I think that's a very real possibility that we could see these, you know, these classic enemies returning, but just a bit more mutated. And yeah, that does put the shits up me. And it should put the shits up you too, because imagine those things, but even more mutated. So here's the juicy stuff. The virus in the game is called Elanthropus, derived from Victor Gideon's research on the mold and the progenitor virus. This might have been changed, or it might still be, you know, in the game. But I do know that the director said, Nakanishi said, that it was more about pathogens as opposed to like the mold or the plagas. But you know, Resident Evil 5 has incorporated the plagas into its plot along with like the progenitor virus and stuff like that. So I could easily see, you know, the mold making its way back into the plot in some shape or form, and Victor kind of messing around with that. And the progenitor virus, which has always been the base virus for everything to be created off of, and creating Elanthropus, you know, from this. So yeah, it's, I mean, through, you know, combining the mold and the progenitor virus, he creates like a pathogen, right? So the mold really has its use, and then it's not useful anymore. So I could see it making its way into the game's plot in a small way, definitely. The virus maintains the host consciousness in some infected individuals, causing exaggerated transformation in others. So maybe Victor has been injecting himself, maybe he tries to use himself as a test subject, and maybe the outside world don't actually know what he actually looks like. So previously I said, yeah, he could, you know, he could have mutations and look the way he does, and then people just, they don't see him maybe, or they are just sort of used to these wackos basically doing this stuff, and so they've got used to it, so now they're not really looked on like they would have been previously. If he's doing good work and he's pretending to be a good person, you know, a provider to society, then I'm guessing people wouldn't think that he's a bad guy, you know, something like that. I don't know. I'm spitballing, I'm theorizing, but yeah, maybe they just haven't seen him. You know, maybe they saw him when he was human, and now like he's mutated and stuff. They don't really ever see him. He just locks himself away. He kind of looks like that sort of person, to be honest, and it's just like the company that's the front, you know, and then his assistant deals, Ellen, basically deals with anything business wise, but obviously she knows what he looks like and she deals with him. So yeah, and it's interesting that it says it maintains the host consciousness in some infected individuals. So yeah, it creates an exaggerated transformation in others. So again, it's out of control. You know, just like any virus within this series, it's out of control. And yeah, I think he's been injecting himself with it. And I guess when he gets burned at the Renwood Hotel, he injects himself with a test strain, you know, of Elanthropus. And that's why it looks like he does in 2026, you know, during the time jump. The game has about 18 hours of campaign. So yeah, I could see that. Everybody plays Resident Evil campaigns or any video game in their own way, like at their own pace. Some people could finish this game in 15 hours, other people might take 20 hours, you know, so, but that's a rough estimate basically. 18 hours of campaign, so that's cool. And we'll also feature an extra mode similar to Mercenaries mode. Obviously I'm going to put up pictures and images of some of the stuff that you can unlock, like costumes and weapon skins, and to be honest, they look like they go with Mercenaries. So yeah, I can see them having a returning Mercenaries mode. Like, again, it's part of the course at this point. We've always got to have like a Mercenaries mode in a Resident Evil game, so yeah. The connections will play a surprise role in the game, helping Leon to find Grace and stop a large infection in Rhodes Hill. That is something I'm not too sure about. But yeah, it would, I mean, we've had Blue Umbrella, so maybe the connections, obviously they have ulterior motives, Brandon Bailey, and it would actually sort of bring in Brandon Bailey as a second antagonist, you know, next to Gideon. But he's sort of helping Leon, you know, and trying to stop an infection. But in reality, he's still a piece of shit. So it's interesting. Like, I could see this game's narrative and plot kind of twisting things a little bit. In Resident Evil 7, we got Blue Umbrella, and it was never revealed whether they had ulterior motives or not. And Chris wanted to scope them out and see what they were about, so he worked with them for a little bit. But it's never been explained what their actual end game is, why they're helping. You know, they just say, oh, well, it's to undo all the bad stuff that Umbrella did. But is it really? You know, and then we have like the BSAA using bioweapons basically in Village. So a lot of these companies and these organizations, they have like ulterior motives, and there is a darker side to them, definitely. So yeah, the connections, I mean, they created Evelyn as a bioweapon, and they were going to mass produce these things, you know, and send them into battlefields. So they're not exactly good. They have some sinister intentions, and we can see that with Lucas Baker. He was going back and forth and talking with the connections, and he wasn't exactly like the pillar of the community. Let's just say that. It was a fucking nut job. So yeah, I can see this game really twisting things, and it being a Nakanishi directed Resident Evil game, I can see him throwing some curveballs. Definitely, he's done it with Resident Evil 7. And the series has then shown that it can throw some curveballs with Village. So I don't doubt that this isn't, you know, sort of on the mark, basically, when it comes time to play the game for ourselves. Everything else, though, that I've read here adds up. You see, there's a lot of it that does add up. So yeah, again, this is why I'm covering this. But yeah, that's about as much info as I can give you guys, and kind of try and piece things together in my own way. In my own broken way, should I say, because it's just, this video feels like it's all over the place, but, you know, hopefully it's making sense, hopefully it makes sense. But yeah, I think it was definitely worth me telling you that there was a spoiler warning, because if you guys have just skipped all the way through, and you've got to the end and you're hearing this, then yeah, if you didn't follow that spoiler warning, then you've been spoiled, I think, essentially, for sort of parts of the game. Definitely, there's still stuff like the ending, and there's going to be, you know, the 3 bosses that haven't really been revealed or shown. I mean, like I said, I'm theorizing that I was going to say Alyssa, but the hag, yeah, Alyssa, will be a boss, but maybe she isn't. Maybe there's another boss, you know, maybe Palak isn't a boss, maybe it's something else. I don't know. I can see his henchman being a boss, and then I can see like the hag being a boss, you know, and obviously Victor will be like the end boss, you know, you'll fight him at the end, but the other 3 I have no clue about, I don't know. But yeah, I think there's just a whole lot of stuff that we don't know, like the other locations, enemy roster, you know, bioweapons that we'll face off against. We know that in the hospital, we fight the zombies, and we fight these more like intelligent zombies, ones that can wield weapons and chainsaws and things like that. That's really cool, right? They kind of act more like the Plagas, the Ganados from Resident Evil 4, and also the Mangini from Resident Evil 5. So that's cool, but at the same time, because we have had that in the CG films, like I think it was Degeneration, was it, or Damnation, we had like Plaga soldier type sort of enemies, but they looked zombified as well. So we've had this before, but not in the games, to my knowledge. Maybe I'm forgetting parts of Resident Evil 6. But yeah, we haven't had zombies full on using weapons like Ganados and showing this sort of form of intelligence. I will say that Brad Vickers in Resident Evil 3 Remake was kind of intelligent, but these, you know, but he still sort of lunged at Carlos and Tyrell and tried to eat them. Whereas these zombies, they can use weapons. They can use chainsaws and rev up chainsaws and stuff. So, yeah, that's cool. But we've only seen those enemies and the hag enemy. We haven't seen the enemies within Raccoon City, or, you know, the other locations that they said we'll be going to. I don't know how many locations are in this game at this point. I know we've got the Renwood Hotel, we have the hospital, and then we have Raccoon City. But are there more? You know, there's going to be a whole ton of stuff that hasn't been revealed in these trailers There's going to be a whole load of stuff. So yeah, I reckon we're in for a big game, for a proper ride. And if it is 18 hours long, then there's a whole load of stuff we haven't seen yet. So yeah, in terms of the open world sort of stuff, like in Resident Evil 4 Remake, we get to use the boat and it's semi-open world. I think that you'll be able to drive Leon's car, I'm thinking, and maybe that's why sort of Porsche has been featured so heavily in this game's marketing. But we'll have to see. That's me just throwing a theory out there. I don't know if they'd go that deep to let you start driving a car around in a Resident Evil game. It seems a little maybe out of place. But we'd have to see. It depends on how it's done. You know, maybe you drive the car and it's almost like over his shoulder, but zoomed in into the car's interior. I don't know, but that might be a possibility. But anyway, we're going to wind down the video. Everything that I've covered and sort of tried to match to the trailer, to the latest trailer. We've talked about obviously the trailer and you know how I felt about it, seeing it and the stuff that was revealed. It was a damn good trailer. It's got me hyped for the game. And to be totally honest, I needed something that felt like a Resident Evil game, you know, that's got back on track. Because Village, as much as I think it's a fun game to play, and I do find it interesting, the fact that it carries the Resident Evil name, it just irks me a little bit, you know. I think it's a cool game in its own right. It holds up on its own, but I think as soon as it starts to creep into the Resident Evil lore and try and change things and... you know, it brings along some of the Resident Evil stuff. I think that's where it started to fall off for me. Do I think it's a bad game? I don't think it's like Resident Evil 6 levels of bad, you know, or kind of the tedium and a little bit of the boredom I got from Resident Evil 0. I think that it's a better game to play and experience than those two. You know, even though I do have a soft spot for Resident Evil 0, and I'm looking forward to the remake and possibly the Resident Evil Code Veronica remake. But again, I think with this game, with Requiem, I think it's got it back on track. It feels like Resident Evil. I like the atmosphere. I think the story's intriguing. I like the two protagonists. I like the villain. You know, there's a lot to like about what I saw in this trailer. Could it go off the rails and completely alienate me as a fan? Well, to be honest with you, there's been plenty of Resident Evil games that have done that. You know, they've gone off the rails and alienated me a little bit as a fan, as a lover of the OG trilogy on PS1, the remake on GameCube, you know, the OG Resident Evil 4. It started with Resident Evil 4, if we're being honest. Actually, it started with Code Veronica and Resident Evil 0, where there were certain things where I was like, whoa, that's a little bit... they've got a little bit too far with that, but over time I've kind of warmed, you know, to those elements of those games. So could it kind of go off the rails and just, you know, alienate me? Yeah, there's a very real possibility it can do that. But I think at this point, at this, you know, this stage of this series and this franchise, I think I've gotten used to it. It's like if I don't like something or I just don't vibe with a Resident Evil title, then it is what it is. I just won't vibe with it, you know. If I can find things to like about them, like Village, I think the gameplay's cool. I like the folklore sort of stuff that's in the game. I like the setting. I think if there's things that I can vibe with, then, you know, there's parts that I enjoy, right? But I will give my critique. It just depends on how it's handled and whether they go too crazy with it and I vibe with it or I don't and it puts me off. You know, Revelations 2 had something similar with the little girl, I forget her name, so bad, like Natalia, where she could sort of see bioweapons and point them out to Barry and see, like, you know, ammo boxes and things like that. I thought that was just weird and just over the top compared to Revelations 1, which was a little bit more grounded. But yeah, I didn't really vibe with that. I didn't really like it. The whole ending just confused the shit out of me. Not really confused as I didn't understand it, but confused as why would they put that in there? It's just weird. You know, why would you put that in a Resident Evil game? And then Village was like that, but times 10. It went just nuts, right? So, like I said, but I like Revelations 2. I like playing as Barry. I like the story. I like Moira. I like Claire. You know, and I think Natalia's a cool character. She's got a cool backstory. I just think it's weird that she has these, like, psychic powers. And it just felt out of place in Resident Evil. Does that mean that I hate Revelations 2? No, I still like that game. There's just certain things that I don't like about it. You know, Alex Wesker was built up, and then she just shoots herself in the head. Sorry, spoilers for, like, a game that's super old, but yeah, it was a bit of an anticlimax. But then we obviously play as Barry and get to see a mutated Alex Wesker. So I thought, oh, you know, it paid off. But then when she's sort of transferring her consciousness into Natalia, and then Natalia's acting like Alex Wesker, I was like, what the fuck? Where are we going with this? And then it's never been resolved. Like, they've never resolved that. So, yeah, and then obviously Village was just, we had like werewolves and vampire women, and it's kind of explained. I mean, I called it back you know, when that game was fresh, like it was about to release, I said, yeah, they're going to mix like wolf DNA with the virus of the game, which they did, you know, and that's in a note, like in the game. It was pretty obvious what they'd done and how they created like werewolves within the game's universe, but it's still just weird. Like, it was like vampire ladies that were like tyrants and Mr. X and werewolves, and then we had like one chick that, you know, could use psychic powers on you to make you think that dolls were trying to kill you, you know, and like me just saying that, like, that's exactly how it felt playing the game. Like, I was thinking, what the fuck is this? You know, it was weird, right? On its, like I said, on its own merits, that was sick. Like, that's cool. It's just that it was a Resident Evil game set within the Resident Evil universe, and it was Resident Evil 8, a numbered title. So, you know, they could have created, like, they could have named it Revelations 3 and had it like that. I don't know, but like I said, there's things that definitely alienate me as a fan, as a long-time fan, someone that's grown up with this series. And so when I see stuff like that, I'm like, oh, it's a bit weird. Like, Resident Evil 4, the original, was supposed to have Hookman. They decided against it, Mikami decided against it, and they had it a little bit more grounded. You know, something that was real and right there in front of you. And it wasn't like a psychological thing. And I do feel like Resident Evil was trying to lean too heavily on the psychological horror, which is Silent Hill's domain, as well as like Project Zero, you know, and Forbidden Siren and games like that. Resident Evil is a bit more grounded. It deals with pathogens, viruses, you know, parasites with the plagas. It deals with that sort of stuff where it's grounded in some sort of reality. When it introduces psychological elements into the series, that's when I start to think it's a little bit weird and it's a little bit alienating to myself and some other fans, you know. A majority of fans that don't really want to see that in Resident Evil. Is it a big deal? Like, does it put me off? Like, if a game's good, if a game's really good, and they introduce it and it's done cleverly, no, it doesn't put me off. That's why I like Resident Evil 7. Because I think the way that they integrated Evelyn's control, you know, her psychic abilities, where she can control everybody. She's like the hive mind, and they're the worker ants or worker bees, and everybody shares this hive mind. They're all linked to the hive mind. I think that was really cleverly done, right? I like that sort of stuff. It's like Ethan isn't actually seeing this stuff. Like, it's not actually happening in the real world, like in reality. But because he's connected to the hive mind, he's connected to Evelyn, he starts to see and hallucinate all this stuff. And as he becomes more infected, he becomes more linked to the hive mind. So he starts to hallucinate more and see more weird shit happening. And they even had this in Resident Evil 4 and the Resident Evil 4 remake, where Leon does hallucinate at one point, you know, as he passes out. So again, this can be used, but sparingly, in small doses, and definitely keeping it grounded. And I think that Village, along with like Resident Evil 6, even though it didn't really have too much of that stuff going on in it, but it was just a bit of a mess, you know, and Revelations 2, I think they go too far into the realm of psychological horror, or at least having this unexplainable psychological stuff within the story. That's my own take and my own opinion. Everybody's different. Some people out there are going to love that stuff and it not bother them too much. And to be honest, it doesn't bother me, like I said, in a way where I just disown a game. Like, if this had some of that stuff in it, but it was an amazing game, I'd go with it. But I think we're safe with Nakanishi, because I think he will be able to ground it and come up with an explanation as to, if it does have weird stuff like that, as to why this weird stuff's happening. I don't think we'll get a conclusion to that sort of stuff. I will say one thing Nakanishi does is he leaves his games on cliffhangers that don't really get explained. Revelations, I would say Resident Evil 7 with Blue Umbrella, but still it's going to be one hell of a ride. So I think, wrapping this up, I think that the trailer was good. I think that the way they've handled each trailer and just drip feeding us, you know, in the trailers is great. It's a great bit of marketing. It keeps us excited. I think there's a lot that's going to surprise us, and I think that the trailer did what it needed to do, and I'm still on board. That's the thing. It didn't alienate me. I didn't watch the first 2 trailers and go, that was awesome, and see the third one and Leon's revealed, and there's a bit more action and all of that good stuff, and then be like, ooh, you know, it reminds me of Resident Evil 6, or ooh, it's, you know, there's parts that remind me of Village. It didn't do that. I was just on board. I thought the music, like, we've already gone through this, I thought everything about it was great, and it pulled me in, and I was like, I'm all for this. You know, I want to play this game. So I think it's gonna undo all the bad feelings and just feeling a bit alienated when playing Village. I think that this is gonna undo that for a Resident Evil fan like myself. Now, everybody likes different things. If people like Village and they enjoy their time with Village, I enjoyed some of my time with Village. That's cool. That's fine. We all like different things. I'm not going to turn around and be like, you're not a real Resident Evil fan because you liked Village, or you like the psychological stuff in, you know, Resident Evil Revelations 2. We're all different. Some people are going to be like, I actually like the fact they're incorporating psychological horror into the series, and other people are going to be a bit like, I don't, you know, I want it to be more grounded and stick to that stuff. So everybody's different. This is just my personal take on it, you know, and how I feel. I like the fact that Resident Evil has always been grounded to an extent. And I'm talking about like grounded in the same way Terminator 2 is, or Aliens, you know. It's always been grounded. There's always been a tangible reason behind a 7-foot humanoid killing machine wearing a fedora. You know, there's always been a tangible reason behind that stuff, and then obviously being able to shoot off his fedora is just something that you've got to do when playing that remake. But yeah, there's always a tangible reason behind stuff, and it's always grounded, and that's how Mikami wanted the series to be, like when he created it. And originally it was going to have more psychological horror elements, but the team decided to move away from that and have something a little bit more grounded, and that's how we got the original Resident Evil on PS1. And along the way we've had psychological elements added into the series, but it's never strayed too far until, you know, Village sort of came onto the scene and was included in the numbered entries. So that's why, like I said, I was a little bit put off by that sort of stuff. Is it an enjoyable game? Again, this isn't a video about Village, but yeah, there are some really enjoyable moments. And to be honest, I think I'm going to get the gold edition, pick it up again and play through it, and go into it with a bit more of a fresher mind, you know, and be a bit more open to it as a sort of standalone Resident Evil title, or just a standalone game in its own right. So I'm gonna give it another go, give it another shot, play through it, and yeah, we'll see how I get on with it. Maybe I'll do a second review on the game and share my thoughts sort of years later, replaying it, because I've only ever really played it once. So yeah, I think it's definitely in need of a second playthrough, and I do like it way more than Resident Evil 6. Resident Evil 6 was the lowest point, I think, for this series, definitely. I still, every time I think, oh, I should just go into it and play Resident Evil 6 with a different mindset and just enjoy it for the campy, sort of cheesy action horror thing, hybrid that it is. Say hybrid, yeah, it is, because it's just this hybrid of different styles. You know, you've got Jake Mueller beating the shit out of things, and then you've got Chris just gung-ho action hero, and then Leon's sort of more survival horror, I guess. But yeah, it was just it's such a mess. Every time I think, yeah, I should just pick it up really cheap and just have fun playing it, you know, because there's been some great Resident Evil titles after that, which I personally have fallen in love with. I just think, I can't bring myself to play it. Every time I think about it, I just think about like the motorbike QTE section and Jake Mueller swinging on poles like he's in Uncharted and beating up bad guys, and it puts me off, man. Chris Redfield jumping onto a BOW, like a massive BOW, and just like yanking this thing out of his back, and it's just so ridiculous. And yeah, Chris Redfield punching a boulder is ridiculous, but the rest of that game, there was things that just hit the mark for me with that game, with Resident Evil 5, so I don't know. But then some people hate Resident Evil 5. You know, some people hate Resident Evil 5 because it's not Resident Evil 4. I don't mind it. I think it's cool. I like it, and I actually quite like the addition to the story's canon and lore. Everybody's different, like I said. I'm not kink shaming anyone. But yeah, I think that's brought us to the end of the video, bringing this to a close. I don't know what's going to be next in terms of info and just stuff that releases before the game's release in February. But I'm looking forward to it. I will keep you guys updated with any more news regarding Resident Evil Requiem. And until next time, I've been System Check 66. Take it easy, and I'll catch you again soon.